Greetings and welcome to our daily walk through the scriptures for April the 16th. You survived tax day, I hope. If you forgot to file, hopefully this didn't create too much panic. Your readings for today, though, should have provided some comfort. Joshua chapter 15, Luke chapter 18, verses 18 through 43, Psalm 86, 1 through 17, and Proverbs chapter 13, verses 9 through 10. And it's been a while since we've talked about the Psalms. And I love Psalms. Psalms are beautiful. Psalms are wonderful. And so today we're going to look a little bit about Psalm 86. Now, this is a prayer of David. Now, remember, Psalms are songs of Scripture. So these were originally songs that somebody wrote in worship of God. And David was a prolific writer of songs, as was his son Solomon. We actually, hear in Scripture and read in Scripture that Solomon wrote quite a number of psalms. However, David is the one that's most remembered for writing songs that we now call the Psalms. Psalms. Get all that? Psalm 86 is a beautiful one that really reflects the heart of David. Now, when we get to reading in the scripture about David and get some more accountings as we get through Joshua and we get through Ruth, we get into 1st and 2nd Samuel, we'll really start looking at David. But David is called a man after God's own heart. And it is not because he is necessarily a good man. It's not necessarily because he's a perfect man. In fact, he's far from it. And we're going to look at some of his flaws as we get into the study. But David is relentless in his pursuit of God. And David does a wonderful job. He obviously spends a lot of time meditating on God because he does a wonderful job of really getting to the heart of worship when it comes to God. And Psalm 86 is no exception. I mean, remember, David is king. Okay? At this point, when David writes the Psalms, he is a king. He has everything going for him. And yet here he does in the first verse, "Hear me, Lord, and answer me, for I am poor and needy." David, in all of his splendor and all of his glory, never stopped trying to rely on God. Through all of his imperfections, he always looks to God, and he asks God because he recognizes God's sovereignty. And so in verse 2, he says, "Guard my life, for I'm faithful to you." And David may not have been faithful to a lot of other things, but he was faithful to God. "Save your servant who trusts in you. You are my God. Have mercy on me, Lord, for I call to you all day long. Bring joy to your servant, Lord, for I put my trust in you." These are words we see a lot from David. Trust. I trust God. It's a great question for us. Do we trust God? I mean, really trust God. Do we trust God the way that David trusted God? David trusted God enough to submit to God even when things were uncomfortable. David trusted God enough to give God his due when it came to his sovereignty. Do we do that? Are we willing to use an overused cliche, let go and let God? Are we really willing to do that? I mean, we see bumper stickers. That was a big fad for a while there where you'd have bumper stickers that said, "Jesus is my co-pilot." Well, why isn't Jesus your pilot? Why isn't Jesus the one who we're willing to let go and give total control? We don't do that. We have a hard time with it. We like to think we have control, and it's almost like taking driver's ed with Jesus, where we're sitting there driving and Jesus occasionally has this little brake pedal down there, or he reaches over and he grabs the wheel. And other than that, though, he just lets us drive. We don't want to drive ourselves if we fully trust God. We want to be like David. "Lord, you are forgiving and good, abounding in love to all who call to you. Hear my prayer, Lord, and listen to my cry for mercy. When I'm in distress, I call to you because you answer me. Among the little g gods, there are none like you, Lord. No deeds can compare with yours. All the nations you have made will come and worship before you, Lord. They will bring glory to your name. For you are great and do marvelous deeds. You alone are God." Now, we see other psalms that David sings that are talking about struggles. This is not one of those. This is just David just talking to God and having a conversation with God. David's a good model for how we have conversation with God. Honest, transparent. David doesn't hide anything back. As a matter of fact, in verse 14, David says, "Arrogant foes are attacking me, O God, ruthless people trying to kill me, for they have no regard for you." And then David says, "Give me a sign of your goodness that my enemies may see it and be put to shame." David has no problem calling out his enemies, and sometimes in uncomfortable ways. In other Psalms, he just flat out says, kill them all. David has no problem expressing his heart to God because he recognizes that God already knows his heart. It's a good lesson for us. To be a man after God's own heart like David, we have to pursue God. We have to be transparent with God and willing to chase God through our shame, through our needs, through our poverty. Okay, hope you've enjoyed this psalm. We'll talk more through our 1-year walk through the Bible tomorrow.